No one had ever seen his hands. Not in the punishing glare of the training gym lights, not in the shadowy backstage corridors, and not even in the quiet, sterile offices where he signed contracts that made him a millionaire. To the world, he was simply known as the man with the gloves, a legend wrapped in an enigma. The reporters, always hungry for a story, spun their own tales. They'd write splashy headlines saying he wore them for luck, a sacred ritual before stepping into the squared circle. His rivals, their faces bruised and swollen from his relentless power, sneered that it was fear, a pathetic attempt to hide some weakness, some deformity. They'd whisper in locker rooms, "He's hiding something, I tell you, something he's ashamed of." But the truth was far heavier, far darker than any rumor they could ever conjure. It wasn't a story for the papers or the talk shows. It was a secret he carried in the silence of his own mind, a ghost that haunted his every waking moment. You see, years ago, long before the roar of the stadium crowds and the flash of the cameras, he was just a kid with fire in his belly and bricks for fists. He fought in the grimy, smoke-filled basements of the underground circuit, where there were no rules, no refs, and no mercy. Just survival. And in one of those fights, under a single swinging bare bulb, it happened. He was fighting a man, a brute who had been terrorizing the circuit. The fight was brutal, a symphony of grunts and the sickening thud of flesh on flesh. And then, in a blind surge of rage and desperation, he landed a punch, a single devastating blow. The crack echoed in the suffocating silence that followed. He'd broken the man's jaw, shattered it so completely the man never spoke another word for the rest of his life. From that night on, the victory felt like acid in his veins. The cheers of the small, bloodthirsty crowd were drowned out by the phantom scream of his opponent. Guilt became his shadow, a relentless tormentor that ate him alive from the inside out. He'd look down at his hands, the instruments of that life-altering violence, and see them stained with something he could never wash off. He made a vow to himself that night, a solemn, desperate promise whispered into the darkness of his lonely room. If these hands can cause such irreversible harm, if they can silence a man forever, then they will never touch the world bare again. They didn't deserve to feel the rain, to hold a loved one, to simply exist in the open. So the gloves went on, and they stayed on. Every fight since that fateful night was a penance. The leather of the gloves became his second skin, a barrier between his cursed fists and the world. He kept them covered not out of superstition, not out of pride, but as a constant, suffocating punishment, a self-imposed prison for his own hands. He wasn't fighting for money anymore. He had more than he could ever spend. He wasn't fighting for fame. He despised the spotlight. He fought for something far more primal. He fought to silence the screams that echoed in his head, to exhaust the guilt that gnawed at his soul, to beat the memory of that night into submission with every jab, hook, and uppercut. Each punch he threw was a prayer for forgiveness. Each victory was just another layer of his personal hell. The world saw a champion, an untouchable force, but inside the ring he was a penitent, flagellating himself with every bell, every round. He was fighting a war on two fronts, one against the man in the opposite corner, and a much more brutal one against the man in his own mirror. The crowd's roar was just noise, a distraction from the deafening silence of his conscience. Then came the final match, the one he'd announced would be his last. The stadium was electric, a sea of faces all there to witness the end of an era. His opponent was younger, hungrier, a mirror image of the man he used to be. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just for a title. This was for his very soul. As he stood in the center of the ring, the referee giving the final instructions, he did something no one had ever seen him do. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and began to unstrap his right glove. The crowd's roar died down to a confused murmur, then to a complete, stunned silence. He pulled it off, then the left, and he held his hands up for the world to see. A collective gasp swept through the arena. The cameras zoomed in, broadcasting the shocking truth to millions. His hands weren't deformed. They weren't weak. They were a roadmap of his entire life, a testament to his private war. They were covered, absolutely covered, in a latticework of scars, white, jagged lines crisscrossing his knuckles, faded pink welts across his palms, deep, puckered divots from battles won and lost. Each scar told a story. This one, from a broken bottle in a back alley brawl as a kid. That one from punching a brick wall in a fit of self-loathing after that underground fight. This cluster, from the countless bones he'd broken, both his and others. They were reminders of every battle, every sin, every desperate grasp for redemption. They were ugly, but they were honest. They were the truth he had hidden for so long. He looked across at his opponent, then out at the silent, watching crowd. For the first time in years, he felt the rough canvas under his bare knuckles. He felt the air on his skin. A single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek, not of sadness, but of release. And that night, for the first time in a lifetime, he fought free. He fought not as the man with the gloves, the haunted legend, but as himself, a man scarred and broken, finally ready to forgive himself. He fought with the weight of his past, not as a burden, but as the source of his unyielding strength. And in that final battle, win or lose, he had already found his peace. Thank you so much for watching. This story is a reminder that our deepest scars are often the source of our greatest strength. If you enjoyed this journey, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that go beyond the surface, and maybe share this with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next one.